This is Rockin HIT Sales, a quick podcast built around the buyer side realities of healthcare. I'm David Hacker, your host and founder of Elevate HIT Sales. In each episode, I sit down with health system and health IT leaders to unpack what actually gets initiatives approved, implemented, and scaled. Today, I'm joined by Sam Morhaim, CEO of Vantage IO, for a practical conversation on why clinical AI tools can look so impressive in a demo, but still fail when they hit hospital review, validation, workflow, compliance, and real world deployment. We dig deep into the gap between works on GPT and hospital ready, why RAG and evidence grounding is becoming such a major issue in clinical AI, and what founders, CTOs, product leaders, and go to market teams really need to understand for claiming their AI solution is ready for provider environments. Sam, welcome to Rockin HIT Sales. I really appreciate you joining me today to talk about why clinical AI tools can look impressive in a demo, but sometimes fail when they hit real world deployment. This is an extraordinarily timely topic for health tech founders, CTOs, product leaders, and the GTM teams trying to understand what it really takes to move from works on GPT to something that is ready for prime time.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So, you've been writing about why clinical AI dies in pilot. When you say that, where do you see most often that it breaks? Is it in the technology, the workflow, the evidence, the review process?
That's a good question. So, almost never is the model. Usually is the layer around it. The top failure points typically are the grounding of the evidence, the audit trails, the failure handling. So basically handling those edge cases. And all the things that people didn't think about when they're testing, when they're having those pristine test scenarios, even when they use synthetic data, that synthetic data is not prepared correctly. And that's where we see most of those failures.
A lot of health tech companies today, they can quickly build a very impressive AI demo. From your perspective, what separates those nice, shiny demos from something that is actually ready for clinical review?
Yeah, of course. So AI has unleashed the power for everyone to build solutions, and that's great. But at the same time, there are a lot of complexities under the hood that people don't understand. So even if you are aware of HIPAA and aware of GDPR and other compliance and security requirements, building something that's going to work as a demo is one thing, and adding all the constraints and all the different layers that will make sure that it's safe and actually efficient and useful for doctors or your ultimate users, it's a complete different game. And a lot of people are underestimating that, on often leaving that for later stages. And that's where a lot of the issues start building up, because you leave it for later, you don't think about it early on. And at some point, either you're going to have to do something as hopefully as small as a small refactor, but as big as a full rewrite, as we've seen with some of the clients that we've helped in the last few months.
Is that kind of where you see the biggest misconception that digital teams have between the gap between passes clinical risk assessment and working on GPT?
Yeah, so there is a big gap of expectations when you use directly. You mentioned GPT. When you use ChatGPT, Grok, any of those directly, they have so much additional layers under the hood and additional piping, essentially. So to give you an example, with a client that we worked on, to ingest labs and be able to process them and put them straight into the patient charts, they were testing this directly with the UI of ChatGPT, Claude, etc. And it worked really fast. It works apparently really well. When you use the API, a complete different story happens. All those, starting from the base system prompt all the way to the architecture that they have behind in order to how they chunk that file, how they index it, et cetera, et cetera. that you don't think about when you're building your prototype or when you're vibe coding, or even if you have a proper team building it, sometimes they don't understand those gaps. And so immediately you get that expectation difference based on what you expect that's happening and what's actually happening in your own application.
Isn't the model accuracy alone, isn't that enough to make a clinical AI tool trustworthy, or does it have to go deeper?
No, it goes much deeper. And I'm going to make an example that I use often. So the models are very well trained in a lot of topics, and they're very good at sounding very smart. And I'm not saying they're not smart. I mean, they're helping us get where we are today after 2-3 years of using them. So they're very useful. But it's like you if I ask you a lot of questions about all sort of topics from the weather or other things, you're gonna have some basic knowledge. But and you can even sound smart when answering those questions. But it's only until you actually sit down and read everything that there is to about, let's say, the weather and the different current patterns and different type of clouds, that you actually become an expert in weather, that you can then make sense of what you're saying and know when you're failing. And that's actually one of the biggest differences between a proper system and maybe just a prototype, is the ability for itself to know that it's failing or that it's not accurately knowing the answer and being honest about it. That's one of the top issues that we find with those models.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you. I'll be coming back to that in just a bit. With your level of expertise, what are the warning signs to you that a clinical AI product was built for a demo impact rather than real world deployment?
But yeah, the first things you can assess is that confidence, that certainty of when it makes assumptions or any sort of statement. There are no, first of all, traceability to the source of that information. That's number one. The confidence to even maybe say this is a weak link or there's not enough evidence for this, but I found this and therefore that's why I'm surfacing it. So that, let's say, self-awareness or self-honesty would one way to put it. As I said, the citation sourcing, the auditability of the answers. So be able to just go back, even be under the hood, and be able to say this answer came from this endpoint in the rack pipeline, and that you have all that traceability. It's a big telltale that it's just a prototype and not a real production system that can pass the scrutiny of enterprise procurement.
Now, where do security, compliance, and clinical teams on the facility side tend to find problems that the product teams did not anticipate?
Yeah. So there are two main areas of concern from the buyer side. One of them is change management. So nowadays, especially because models and technology is evolving so fast, back in the day, you would certify a version and you will go through the few months of procurement, and that version is locked. And now they can trust it. However, with the speed that we have today, the model can evolve, the parts of the code can evolve almost on a daily basis. We're seeing uh, all these companies pushing code even at a few times per day. So the underlying model and the logic might change, and the hospital or the buyer might be unaware of it. So the consequences of or the if the effects might not be immediately seen, and they'll go under the radar. The second one where they struggle a lot is definitely those edge cases. So there's always going to be some extreme case or not so extreme, but it's just not part of the happy path, where things might break and there's not enough safeguards built into the tool that would give the hospital security team or review or the pilot supervisors enough information. So they need to have additional telemetry tools, observability that will allow them to prevent this, or at least observe them before it reaches patients directly or users directly.
Now, how should companies think about the retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, compliance and evidence grounding in a clinical environment?
Yeah. So that's a big one, because people most teams are not fully understanding yet RAG. There is definitely at the core of it, there's a lot of security considerations. This is a new component. So just like when we added a database or file storage, now we're adding RAG, and RAG might even at some point cross pollinate or even spread data that you did not intend it to be seen. So now the bot or the LLM can query the RAG and expose data from two separate patients, even if you index it correctly and you do a lot of certain things. There are additional layers that you can apply or additional techniques that you can do to ensure that that doesn't happen. The other and the most probably the biggest risk or PHI leakage that we've seen happens at the RAG, because they take real patient data used to train the models or used as foundational data ingested into the RAG, and now you have real PHI on those RAG servers serving data to the LLM that at some point might be either reverse engineered to figure out what the patient is, even if you de-identify it, or even at face value, just getting information that was not meant to be shown or learned by the LLM at that point.
Now, in your writing the publications, you've outlined 6 architectural layers that separate a clinical grade system from a demo. At a high level, Sam, can you kind of walk us through those layers and why do they matter?
Yeah. So one of the most important ones, as I said, is the traceability. So be able to know exactly at what point the information came to your LLM. Where did it come from? So be able to know that is one of the first things. You need to know that similarity on RAG, it's not the same as relevance. So that's kind of the number two. Another one that's very important, of course, is the logging aspect of it. So not just traceability, being able to know where it came, but how you log the data that a prompt went in, what system prompt came together with that prompt, all the artifacts that you send to the LLM, and on the way back, what did the LLM return, and your ability to, first of all, safely store that, and then be able to safely retrieve it in case you need to reconstruct an answer, and even just for internal improvement, that's critical. And a lot of people don't usually have that very well, or it's not secure enough. And another one is the ability to speculate and be honest about it. So LLMs, as we've seen with multi-agent, they like to let's say speculate one to another, but be able to say, we think with high certainty this is the right answer, or with a lesser degree of certainty that this might be the answer, but letting you know very transparently. So those are maybe top 3, top 4. There might be other ones, but those are like at the top of the list of what typically breaks.
Failure modes. They're probably the least flashy layer of AI, but probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the most important. What should an AI system do when it either doesn't know or it shouldn't answer?
Yeah. So number one, it should be honest about it. So there's the evidence fit issue where LLMs don't like to say, I don't know. And so at the core, we need to give the ability to the system to say, I don't know, or my certainty level is very, very low, and be able to surface that. It can look in many different ways in different systems. It could be a cannot process this because just I don't know. In some platforms that we've developed, we actually outline and say, as I said, the evidence is not strong enough, but here's what we found, so that it's honest about it. And so at the core, those would be the two most important safeguards to add.
Now, for a digital health team that's preparing to sell into a facility, what should they have ready before they even enter into a clinical AI review process?
At the core is being able to answer the primary question, where does your PHI data lives and where does it go to? Because again, nowadays with so many endpoints and models, the data can live and flow into so many different directions. Even if you have a business associate agreement, data should not just be flowing blindly to one of the LLMs. Even if you think you have it under Bedrock with AWS and a BA, data should not be flowing there freely. There needs to be some safeguards. So your ability to have a map of where your data lives, how it's stored, and where does it flow at all times, that is that answer on its own is going to allow you to answer multiple questions on those questionnaires.
How can these AI companies talk about their capability without overclaiming or creating risk for themselves during that review process?
Yeah. So I think at the core is being honest about, we've seen this claim of people claiming the zero hallucinations. And we need to be honest about it that LLMs, AI, as in nature, it's a non-deterministic system. And if you're familiar with like the butterfly effect or chaos theory, a small change or small variance in one part of the system when it's not deterministic can end up in a very different result at the output of that system. So that honesty or self-awareness is very important. The other one is knowing that you cannot test what you don't. So you don't know what you don't know, and so you have to be always pushing the boundaries of what needs to be tested, not just with synthetic data and real data, but again, going beyond as to what edge have we not tried yet? What combination of things have we not tried yet? And keep testing. You'll never get to 100% on a non-deterministic system, but the closer you can get to that golden mark, will allow you or will give you that additional boost of confidence and allow the pilots and the actual implementation to be successful.
Now, can you offer any guidance to the teams out there on documentation, evidence, or architecture stories that will help a facility trust that the company actually understands clinical risk?
Currently they're doing a pretty good job, but they need to go beyond just checking the box. We live in a world that's again it's moving so fast that maybe having that questionnaire with 100 check boxes and just passing it over to the next department is not going to cut it. They need to pull up their sleeves and get into the system, understand how it works, understand where PHI moves through the system, so that they can go and try to not just make sure that it works, try to break it, see where it's going to not behave as expected. And I think that would alleviate a lot of the pains that we've seen. You need to go past that checkbox mentality.
I think we're past the question of if, now it's a question of how. Should the go-to-market teams adjust their messaging when selling clinical AI into hospitals?
Yeah, definitely. Right now, I think the marketplace is so crowded. Everyone has been unleashed and now they're creating solutions left and right. And so there needs to be a differentiator. Everybody just stamp their AI on their name or AI native, but just adding a chatbot to your product doesn't make it AI native. So at the core, they need to adjust the messaging to stand outside, stand above the crowd, be able to find the real gaps, because now everybody's AI. What's going to be your true differentiator? What makes you different, sets you apart from all the other ones, and not just cost? Because we know, hospitals are cost insensitive for the most part. What really matters is this going to make a big enough splash that is going to justify the effort and going above and beyond of what your competitors are doing.
Is it fair to say that because of this tidal wave of AI and everybody putting AI onto to their logo, is it fair to say that now, as part of the go-to-market readiness, that architecture needs to be an important component of that sales motion conversation?
Absolutely. And I think as the regulation catches up, so as HIPAA keeps adding up certain things to the safe use and efficient use of AI, um, architecture is going to be at the center. We're going to have additional tools from the buyer side to be able to know that what you're claiming is actually true And so before it would take a due diligence team to inspect that. Now it's going to be a few commands and be able to know that for sure. So transparency and preparation of that architecture, making sure that it's correct, that is up to standards to what you're selling, it's going to become crucial for sure.
All right, so that brings us to our final two questions, what I refer to as my lightning wrap. Very quick, rapid fire questions with the expectation of the answers being the same. So the first lightning wrap question is, what is one thing clinical AI companies should just stop saying in front of clinical AI reviewers?
I'll go back to the stop saying hallucination free because it's a fallacy, and we need to be aware of that and yes, surface that instead of trying to hide it or negate it.
And my final question is, what is the one thing every AI company should build or document before they start claiming their AI is clinically ready?
That's a good question. I don't think there's a single thing. I think it's just a combination of all the right things done in the right sequence. Having a trusted partner or a trusted set of advisors that have seen this before and have done it before to guide you through that would be very important, and that's why they need to do it as early as possible in their process.
Sam, thank you so much for joining Rockin HIT Sales. This is really a really great conversation on why clinical AI readiness, it's just not a technical issue. It's trust, evidence, workflow, go to market. And I'm 100% positive our listeners are going to walk away with a much clearer understanding of what reviewers are really looking for and what founders need to build and document before claiming their AI is ready for clinical environments. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
And as I do with every episode, let's take a quick look at my three brief takeaways from my conversation with Sam. Number one, clinical AI rarely fails because of the model alone. The weak points are often around the model, the grounding, audit trails, failure handling, workflow fit, PHI movement, and the safeguards needed for real world clinical environments. Number two, RAG is becoming a major clinical AI risk area. Retrieval augmented generation can be very powerful, but if teams do not understand how the data is indexed, retrieved, separated, and exposed, RAG can create serious PHI and evidence grounding problems. Three, architecture now has to be part of go-to-market readiness. Clinical AI companies need more than a strong demo. They need to explain how the system works, where the data flows, how evidence is grounded, and what happens when the system is uncertain and why hospital reviewers should trust it. Have questions, comments, or guest ideas? Email me at podcast@elevate-hit-sales.com. Music is courtesy of Pennsylvania's finest, my friends, the Badleys. And since I'm supporting Bachman Turner Overdrive today, remember, if your clinical AI only looks good in the demo, you ain't seen nothing yet. To get hospital ready, you need evidence, grounding, audit trails, safe failure modes, and a system that can truly start taking care of business.